Take it away, Pharaoh.
Oh, so you're just going to throw me under the bush. Anyway, welcome, global citizens. Yeah, so this is our podcast, Stay Woke. Again, just to reiterate to everyone, our podcast is really focused on awareness and resolution. So not only do we discuss subjects, but we really try to find ways to either share resolutions or either, part of our movement is to become those that can be involved in developing resolutions, right? Be actual part of it. So one of our major platforms, just to give a plug in for our earlier, was, we did our first podcast on the homeless situation called Tinted, an American Fuckery. So thank any of you guys who had a chance to kind of look at that. And then subsequently following that, we had viruses and vaccines, right? And I thought since in this age when, we're now still caught in this pandemic, to really have an opportunity to discuss as time goes on, some of the myths, some of the facts, some of the concerns, some of the things that we don't know. So a little bit my background is that I've only been a podcaster for maybe like 3 or 4 months, so really brand new at this. We dropped 2 podcasts, The Scribe and I, Tinted, the homeless situation, and then the viruses and vaccines. We have other platform items we look to, to share, but this is what we're in right now. For my daily work, my normal job, my 9 to 5, I consult for pharmaceutical companies. And I've been doing that for the last 25, 29 years. So I do drug product development, to be specific. So I help companies develop drugs and bring them actually to market. So I work with clinicians, sometimes with doctors, but mostly doing the biologics and the chemistry behind developing drugs and helping companies to bring those to market. For a long time, I worked for a major manufacturer called Merck and Pfizer, Novartis, Roche, a few of the other ones. So I've been heavily involved directly with manufacturing of vaccines and drugs and different types of quality drugs that you bring to market. So not an expert per se, but I have some experience. So I thought today was important for us not only to put out information on our podcast, but let's have a dialogue about growing concerns in regards to that. So open forum, let's dialogue about anything, but I think it's important if you haven't got a little sippy sip, get your little something to sit back and let's go on this dialogue journey, if you all please. And as I want to say before we get started in the dialogue, welcome. All of you guys are global citizens, and thank you so much for the day, right? Stay sheltered.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pharaoh. So, the lines are open, guys. Feel free to use the chat to ask your questions. You can also raise your hand if I can see you.
Just unlock your phone and chime in, right? Let's get it.
Yeah, or just on your phone. Unmute yourself because I muted everybody and ask your question. So take it away. Freedom.
Yeah, what's going on, Pharaoh?
Talk to me, brother.
All right, so I have a quick question. Obviously, I'll have several as the podcast goes on, but the first question will be about the vaccine. Coming from a man of your stature, being in the pharmaceutical industry, being a scientist, as well as being a Woque podcaster, what are your thoughts of a potential vaccine, of it potentially being perhaps mandatory? Is this something that you think that we all should consider doing? Do you think that we should practice the right, if we have the rights, to decline the vaccines? So just generally speaking, can you just speak on vaccinations?
So that's a really good question. And it's been a question and a debate that's been going around for many, many years in regards to that. The vaccines and the history of vaccines, just to be perfectly honest with everyone, we don't have a really good history of vaccines in America, how they were manufactured. And that's just generally because as, time progresses, you learn more about different types of sciences, but sometimes it's by default, right? If you look at in the 1800s and 1900s, they were doing open surgeries in basic rooms and lecture halls, right? They didn't really understand about microscopic organisms, right? Bacteria, virus, fungus, and parasites that can infect your body because you can't physically see those. So naturally, you don't really know what's going on earlier on. But now as time and science has progressed, we've learned a lot about our vaccines. They're much more safer than they were earlier on. And what happens is that to bring vaccines to market, the federal government, the Food and Drug Administration to be exact, and that's one thing I also want to just share with everyone. It's always important, I think, to fact check also, right? No matter what we share on the podcast, I think it's important for you to do your own research in the background. Because one of the things I said in the earlier segments of our podcast was that, fact check all damn day, right? I think it's important that you weigh multiple options and see the consistency between those or the lack of consistency between those. So the sources I usually go to are, I tried not to focus so much, even the things that I need to learn on propaganda, but more toward really finding like medical scientific facts that support. So the WHO organization, the World Health Organization is one amazing source. The NIH, the National Institute of Health, is another great organization. The Center for Disease and Control in Atlanta is another great organization to look for. And then, of course, the organization that approves our current vaccines is the Food and Drug Administration, right? So I want to encourage you to go, if you have a chance, and listen to the full part 2 segment of my viruses and vaccine podcast where I talk about it in depth. But to answer your question, the first one is, should it be mandatory? So if I want to pose a scenario. So say I think everyone should have their own choice, right? If you are isolated in your own area and you came up with a disease or something that was communicable, meaning that you could transmit it to other people being in their presence, right? I think there's a certain amount of obligation you have to protect others outside of you. Now, if you lived in your own area with, you can have your own like space and you didn't have to interact with other people, I think then the choice probably should be yours. It still really is whether you're vaccinated or not, because not all of the diseases and the bacteria you obtain are communicable that you can, but the ones that are, my honest opinion is that I think everyone should be vaccinated against that. If you go to work, you're in the open places, and if it's easily passed on or transmitted to other individuals, I don't know. I think you should have some kind of moral obligation to other people around you to also protect their health while you still have a choice whether to take the vaccine, if that makes sense. So that I still think it's up to you. I just think that we have to think about the other people that are around us and how we are affected by, how we affect them in reference to whether or not I infect them or I can affect them by my own personal choice, if that makes sense.
So
with regards to whether or not a vaccine is going to be made anytime soon, I think it will be. What happens is that once we isolate the strain of the actual virus itself, and that information is shared with multiple companies and doctors, everyone begins to rush and be. So once that was, I think, around in January, when I think the Chinese organization actually isolated the virus, and it was shared it with the WHO organization, which subsequently shared it with all the subsequent nations, that other manufacturers and other clinicians began to develop a vaccine. So some of that information is shared widely. But that's a really great question, and I'm going to try to answer another question after this, but this is a really important piece in terms of timing. So even though you've isolated the actual virus itself, that once that's isolated and you develop what they call a vaccine that will help your body respond to it, you still have to manufacture that in bulk, be able to test it, be able to get it out to, to whatever, CVS, your doctor, to whether it's in an oral, a tablet, or a cream, or an injectable, and get it to you. So it takes time to get it. That's why they say a year. They may have the cure, or they may not the cure per se. They may have some of the vaccine developed, but whether it's safe and it's effective are the two key points to decide whether you should release it. So although information may show in like small populations that it works really well, it doesn't mean I can go start injecting that into millions of other people, hoping that it will work without further data. If that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Next, anyone else?
Thank you, Freedom, for that amazing question.
Yeah, that was a great question.
I have another one if nobody has a question.
Let's see if Michael has a question. Michael, do you have a question?
Yes, I can go
Deborah,
next.
Michelle,
Go ahead.
anybody.
All right, you guys can hear me?
Yeah,
I can.
All right. So just to bounce off of what you were saying, right, in terms of, because there's like two views when it comes to this whole like pandemic, right? Some people look at it as a pandemic, and there's another group of people who look at like as a pandemic, what they call it is pandemic, right?
Sure, yeah.
There's a lot of like, you know, mistrust and a lot of like, you know, like uncertainty about like the real, like, you know, effect of this whole thing that we're going through right now. So if that is the case, right, and this, you know, we find the vaccine, I've heard, you know, that notion that, you know, not actually taking the vaccine is like, you know, that's going to endanger the people around you and your community and other people, right? But
it could. Not definitive. It could.
It could. Okay, but if someone is vaccinated, shouldn't they be immune to actually like contracting the virus?
You're right. You're right. That's a really great question. If you're vaccinated, right? This is the point of vaccinations are used as a preventative and not a cure. So if you're vaccinated, they test your blood and you should have a certain amount of antibodies in there that shows you have a great immune response, right? So the likelihood if you are infected with the virus itself, your body can fight it off because you have a high concentration of the antibody that fights off the actual virus. So when you get a vaccine, it's either what they call, it's either dead, they chemically kill it, or they call it attenuated, which is partly live. And the reason why they give you the virus in its first in killed form is that it makes sure it doesn't cause any other adverse reaction or the actual disease itself, right? But what you're looking for is your body. Anytime you have a foreign object or pathogen that enters your body, your defense mechanisms automatically capture the pathogen, in a sense, make an antibody to it, right? And then they try to subsequently kill it, right? So what we do, we in a sense not tricking your system, but the vaccine puts a virus in that's unactivated, meaning it doesn't cause the disease. Your body has a response to it, means it makes soldiers or antibodies against it, and then you have an immune response. So those immune responses matter. And that's a really great question you asked, Michael, because some people can have a low or a small or a weak immune response, and you can get reinfected again. Some people will have a large or better immune response, and then that way it protects you actually against the virus. So you have to measure the amount of your immune response once you have the vaccine. So sometimes you have to get what they call a booster. Booster shot.
So those that are going to be at risk are still going to be people who are not vaccinated, basically.
Yeah, but not from the people who are vaccinated, from people who probably didn't get vaccinated, who are what they call asymptomatic, meaning I'm not showing any symptoms, but I still may have the infection inside. So you cannot show symptoms, still be infected, and what they call you'll be shedding virus. So you'll actually be shedding the virus in your coughs, your sneezes, and anything out of your oral orifices that may land on surfaces or when you're dialoguing with people in enclosed spaces. So you may not know. This is the issue with testing currently. So the only way when you don't know what your populace is, when you finally decide or find out that a virus has now spread, especially the mechanism in which it spreads, if it's now easily communicable through just dialogue or through talking or being in the same space, that makes it much more dangerous, right? So, and then the other issue is that sometimes you don't see the onset of conditions for at least maybe 2 to 14 days. So I could walk around on my 6th or 7th day infectious, and never really know that I'm shedding virus and infecting other people around you. So when they say flatten the curve, is that in order to get control, if you haven't tested everyone, once we isolate those that are already infected will then, after a period of 14 days, begin to show some symptoms. And you're like, I know that you're infected. But if you continue to socialize, it continues to mix up the pool and you'll never really know. If that makes sense.
That does make sense, yes. Let me ask you a follow-up question to that.
Please.
So I've been, a bunch of friends have been forwarded me this message. Actually, one of my friend who was supposed to join the call, she's the one who actually sent it to me first. And it's this picture that basically says, "This are how you go about, declining a vaccination if they force it on you," basically, right? And there's 3 points, mentioned there. And for me, looking at it, you see, basically how I looked at it is there's a certain compound that is found in that vaccine that, if you actually, I forgot exactly how it goes, but you can make the case that doesn't sit well with your system.
You could be allergic to it.
Right?
You could be allergic to it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You can be allergic to it, yeah.
Yeah, so even this vaccine that they're working on is not actually something that works on for every system that that is existing in the population, right?
Which is a good point. This is why you should get screened by your doctor, right? And then you should. So what issues I think doctors have with patients is that we don't always tell the truth, right? We don't always say what's wrong with us, things that we're suffering from sometimes, and sometimes it's only through blood work that I can find out if you have issues that are not equivalent to taking the vaccine. So no one really, kids, they do. I think the only area that you have to force to take vaccines are when you take your kids to school, because they have multiple other kids in that age ingest many pathogens and pass it on to each other. They don't have really good hygiene techniques. So if you don't, you'll have outbreaks a lot. So they require you when some of your kids, right? Some kids are becoming, and that's a really big issue with anti-vaxxers against their kids. But if your kid goes to school and you know your kid is susceptible to other bacteria and other things that they can infect other kids, that you have some responsibility, I believe, to protect yourself and to protect your other kids. Or the other kids, right?
Gotcha. Thank you.
If that makes sense, brother.
Yes, it does.
Thank you, guys. Anybody else have a question? Lamar, you're muted.
Unmute yourself, brother.
I'm unmuted. Go ahead.
Unmute yourself. There you go.
You and I spoke the other day, but I want to go over again the question that I asked you. After you have received the vaccination, I remembered with previous, flu vaccinations and such, that it was said that the vaccination doesn't prevent you from getting the flu. In those cases, that it would lessen the severity of it if you did get it. How does that compare to what they're trying to develop now? And also, even if you have been vaccinated and you are exposed to it, are you then still contagious even though you've been vaccinated for any amount of time?
So multiple questions there. So I want to address the very first one. So I think you asked me once if you're say the first question again, Lamar, one more time, please, sir.
If you are vaccinated,
sure.
Can you still, after exposure, contract it, but just not have a lesser severity that you experience of it? So I look at all vaccination. I look at your body. So your body's not necessarily a 1-for-1. It's not an exact science let's say that. And everybody's body differs by how what we eat, how we take care of ourselves. So what's really difficult when you're developing a vaccine is a one-size-fits-all. So that's why I said the two key elements is it safe and is it effective? Right. So the effective piece is the other aspect. Once we prove that it's safe, that it won't cause the disease itself, the effectiveness based on a person's individual response, your body weight, your size, so how many doses you take, and then to understand if you have any underlying other issues. But the premise is this, right? If you're well, you get vaccinated. The idea is not to develop the disease. So some people think after they get vaccinations, they have some kind of response. It doesn't mean you're getting the disease. What it means is that your body's now noticed that you have a foreign pathogen in it, right? It may not be infectious, but it's a foreign pathogen that's been entered to your body. So this sends troops to that area. They said, hey, we found out that you have an infectious agent in there. That's what you feel in the sense of response. But after a while, it should subside, and you shouldn't have at the same type of reaction you would if the infection completely took place. Right. So it's not that you've gotten sick, you have slight symptoms, but they shouldn't last longer like if you would have the entire virus. But what it means is that your body's now developing an immunity to them. So when you feel sick in any kind of situation, it's because your body's undergoing a fight. And some, no matter if it's the cold, the flu, whatever is your troops that protect the inside of your body, then when any foreign agent gets inside, it sends troops to there. Sometimes they have what they call a cytokine storm or an autoimmunity issue. So it means that it's like if you are in a war and some of your troops were dressed in red, right? And then, your troops were dressed in red and the other troops were dressed in blue, right? And they're all on the battlefield and I'm coming with a tank to shoot something at them. And then what happens is that, say, I can't tell the difference, or I know that I can't win the war by trying to pick out one of the reds. So what I do, I bomb the entire area and kill everybody in sight. So your system, when you have a cytokine storm or when the virus gets in and it still continues to replicate like the coronavirus is currently doing, your body then floods the area with troops shooting everything in sight. So you end up developing what they call the inflammatory piece in your lungs, right? This is where you start getting fluid in your lungs and you start coughing a lot. And this is where the fever comes in time. All those are symptoms that your body is in a war with the virus inside you. Those are the symptoms that actually show. So to your point, the next one, once you're vaccinated, if the virus enters your body and you already have troops that recognize how to fight the virus, you should have the diminished or hardly any symptoms. And you shouldn't be infectious to anyone else because the virus is not allowed to what they call proliferate or grow where you can become infectious to others.
So it's not shedding, as you
You're
say.
not shedding virus in a sense, right? Because it may enter your body, right? But you'll never really know it. And you might feel a little sick, but you won't be shedding virus that way because your system has already recognized that it has a foreign object that's been there before or that it looks like it's been there before. And that can either be from your vaccination or from you undergoing the virus itself and then your body overcoming it on its own, which sometimes some people do.
So is there any kind of speaking of the timing of it, once you get the vaccination, how long, and maybe it's individual or to different people, but how long before that resistance develops?
So that's a really good question. So this is why it's hard to balance when people panic about issues and when a virus breaks out, they want the cure right away. And I think the government and people should just be really honest with everyone and about the time frame how long that it takes. So to talk about robustness or efficacy, remember I said the two key things to making any vaccine are safety and whether it's effective. So the efficacy piece takes a long time. That means you have to keep testing larger populations incrementally over a period of time. Test 20 people. It's safe. It works out pretty well. They have a good immune response. You test 100 people. It works out really well. It's good. They have a good immune response. You can test 1,000 people and then find out that when you got to a larger population of people that it doesn't work out that well. A lot of drugs happen that. Then that takes them all the way back to zero. If it works out well during the course of the way, the longer we have to test more of the population, the better we can assure the vaccines will give you are safer, or not safer, but more effective. So sometimes some vaccines that you get, like diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, you only need one of those for life. And your body, now we've developed those so well, you only need one shot and you have immunity for life. Others, maybe after 4 years, we found out collecting data that you need another booster shot as you get older, or maybe just twice, like the pneumonia shot. You only need 2 of those the pneumonia shot, only 2 of those in your lifetime, right? And then you can develop a stronger immunity against that. So it depends on the actual virus itself, which is really the rate limiting factor, if you want to call it. Like, what determines everything is this piece of genetic material that has this great tenacity to be able to survive. So it mutates, right? So we have to isolate the strains. Sometimes it's the vaccines we've given you and it breaks out again and it's mutated. The vaccine that we gave you last year no longer is effective. And we don't know it until you start seeing people have other symptoms again. And viruses have been around for billions of years and live everywhere. Now, we can talk about that in my next podcast in climate control, how I think our invasion of our planet has released other viruses on the thing. So the plan piece, I don't think it is, but I think by us being selfish on our environment, we've now encroached on areas where viruses were, dormant, and have released them into our system. That's my thought.
Okay, but I mean, I want to take it to an individual level. Okay. That's what I meant by maybe different depending on the individual. But if I get a vaccine, how long does it take for that vaccine to work for me as an individual?
And no one can tell you that. And no one can tell you that. Well, we can say that we can show you that in everything we've used in terms of being safe and effective. And your doctor really needs to know. The key is that I don't think you should be getting any vaccines without blood work, right? Without going to your doctor, getting blood work. Because if you're allergic to it, if you have any underlying diseases to that cause adverse reactions to the virus, they should know that first so they can tell you. And before you get any vaccine, you can ask them, hey, tell me what are your ingredients? Where do you get it from? That's a great question. It's legal to ask, and you should always ask it of any of your healthcare providers to show you the information, to tell you about it. But I think that dialogue should take place, and I don't know how much of that dialogue is actually going on.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lamar, for that great question. Anyone else? A question. I see Maya joined, Deborah, Michelle. I'll get back to you, Freedom.
Freedom has a question.
I know Freedom already asked. I want to see if I can give other people an opportunity.
Deborah, Michelle, any of the other 2 global citizens that are on the phone? Dave?
Nope. Okay, I'm going to take it back to...
I'm surprised you guys don't have anything about the current vaccines coming up. All
right, go ahead.
You still social distance, right? Talk to me.
Go ahead.
All right, Pharaoh, I got a couple of questions. So first, I'm going to ask about naturally taking care of yourself and protecting yourself. Obviously, we all know we should wash our hands. A lot of dirty people haven't been doing this, and now this has forced people to start to really check themselves and take care of themselves, right? But taking the past, washing your hands and doing the simple things that we all know, what can you naturally do to protect yourself and to boost your immunity in regards to your nutrition? And like, for example, right now, I'm currently on a 36-hour fast whereby I'm doing this not just for my body, but also mentally and spiritually. And I also read that going on fasts every once in a while will also boost your immunity. So coming from you, what are naturally things that we can do to protect ourselves and boost our immunity?
So, they say you are what you eat, right? And so your body, I know we think, we want to take great care of it, but your body doesn't really know anything about like keto diets or other stuff like that. It only requires nutrients, right? Your body is what it needs in order to survive, but to have longevity, right? And I think you have to, really take great care of your body as you move along, right? In terms of age and timing. And a lot of that depends heavily on your diet, right? To exercise, right? And I think another aspect of it is like your mental capacity, right? I think that it's a balance between everything too, because stress Sometimes stress on your cells, really causes your body to, be susceptible to other diseases and to other communicable diseases. But I think it's really trying to find your perfect balance for yourself, right, nutritional wise. Mm-hmm. So I always advocate people should, go and talk to your doctor, right? If you do a 36-hour fast, then where are you getting your nutrients from, right? Where are you getting other things, and how does that affect your body in terms of cleansing? I think nothing's wrong with doing it. You should just try to do it really safely. And I think it's to listen to your body, right? If your body, the only way it tells you there's something wrong is that it has pain, right? Listen to the pain. If there's something hurts, something's wrong, right? You may not know what, but it's hard for any doctor to look inside of you without x-rays or cutting open to see how your heart or your lungs or your liver or your pancreas is actually working. The only thing that gives us an indication of that is by taking blood samples and analyzing those to see if there's specific hormones or enzymes in there that give you some indication of how they actually normally function. So in terms of taking care of yourself, like, fruits and vegetables, anything green is amazing, right? Ginger, things helps to boost your immune system. But normally if you take care of things with the virus, you could be healthy with the virus, right? And the virus can attack your body, right? It may help you recover, but you may still fall susceptible to it. You may not know genetically you have an underlying genetic disorder, and that virus does something to that piece that causes your body to act differently, right? That can actually happen. So your body's so unique and strong, but it's also difficult to understand in that sense too. So I think each of us to become aware and listen to your body, right? Listen to what it's actually telling you, right? The basic stuff like nutrition, exercising regularly if you can, refrain from the other things like drinking. Right, maybe smoking, right? But you gotta have some vice, right? You don't have to, but you might have some vice. I think life is really about balance, right? And you protect yourself as best you can, right? But listen to your body is the key thing. And I don't know how many people regularly go to the doctor. That was one of my other points. Like, whether you're healthy or not, you should go to the doctor at some point in time, right? As you grow older, to give an idea of how your body's performing, because there's other things in the environment that you have no control over. The air we breathe, the water we drink. I mean, some things, I don't know. So yeah. So hope that answers the question, brother.
No, it does. It gives a lot of insight. And I had one more question.
Sure.
So, coming from yourself, what are your thoughts on radio waves and cell signals and 5G and how it affects our biochemistry and if it correlates with flu-like symptoms?
Sure. So radio waves are really associated with cancer, not necessarily with, they affect your biology in a sense, like, they could cause, and cancer is really what they, like, your cells have a normal growth mechanism, meaning that when cells grow in a particular area and they touch each other, it's what they call no contact inhibition. It stops growing. Cancerous cells don't know when to stop growing. They keep growing on top of each other, and this is how you get the lumps in multiple parts of your area, right? It's tissue that continues to proliferate and grow in different organs around your area, right? And that process that tells the cells that normally when it touches another cell to stop is part of the normal mechanism. So radioactivity messes with that normal functional mechanism. And it sometimes can have your cells go screwy and you can start having them develop and grow on top of each other in certain areas of your body. A virus is a genetic piece of material, right? That radio waves can't get it inside your body, right? They can affect organs and cells already in your body, but they can't implant viruses inside your body, right? So virus has to have a mechanism to get in. By the nature of the virus in itself, It only can grow when it's inside your body and infects one healthy host cell. The way it enters in, we currently know by sneezing, coughing, and stuff, getting it on your hands and wiping it on your eyes or your nose or your mouth. It has some way to get into your internal system and affect your. So if you have invisible radio waves that maybe traverse your body, there's no way to really carry the virus. You understand what I mean? To get it inside, right? So maybe cancer and that piece of it, and you have to have a large dose of radioactivity over a large period of time, because your body has a really great way of cleaning itself of other stuff. It's just large doses of anything could be problematic. So I don't think that's true that 5G or any other radio waves per se can introduce the virus into your body. This is what is great about biologics, because we know clear mechanisms, but it's not always great because it's really hard to find cures and vaccines.
Okay.
Muted.
Anyone else?
I'm muted. Okay. Is there anything to, scientifically speaking, to keeping your body in an alkaline state to prevent?
What do you mean an alkaline state? So
I just hear about all these different diets that talk about eating things and drinking things.
Yeah, so your body has a host of, amino acids are great. They're the building blocks of proteins, and proteins are actually good because they build for muscle and tissue. But alkaline has to do with like acidity and stuff in your body. And I don't know if that balance really matters. Your body already has a very clear balancing system out. What throws it off balance is the kind of stuff we eat in either too large portions or too much quantity, or just always that and not a balance of everything else. Your body's really strong and really unique in that sense. So I don't really know what alkaline state means per se, but if you want to say keep your body in balance, I think always water is good. Less sugar, right? Less alcohol, because what those do is the components in that nutrient. So for alcohol, it dries your cells and body cells out, right? That forces them not to operate correctly. Sugar, sometimes too much of it, you need it but it can convert itself into fat, and you might, and it needed for energy. But it also can store fat, right, and be hard to get rid of, and then it can force your pancreas to have difficulty in regulating your insulin, right, over a period of time, because our bodies naturally decay. So I want to tell all the millennials on the line, the younger folks, there's no way you're going to maintain that state forever. It's just not going to, no matter what you do, no matter how long and you can extend it, but the body's in a cycle, right?
Please don't come for us like that.
I'm coming for you.
Please don't come for us like that.
You're born, you get sick, you grow old, and you die. You're born, you grow old, you get sick.
Okay, so listen, right? So this, now I'm triggered. You just triggered me now.
Shots fired.